Hey guys, welcome to this episode of my YouTube channel where I'm gonna dive deep into the 4 ways that you can keep an elevated emotion throughout your day. So we all know how it goes, right? You get up in the morning, you spend 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, sometimes even an hour on your spiritual practice, on your breath work, on your meditation. You feel amazing. You tap into all these juicy, amazing chemicals in your body like oxytocin and serotonin and dopamine. You're feeling so good. Your frequency's super high. You're ready to take on the day. You go out into your life and then life happens. It happens to all of us. And then we're stuck and struggling with how do I maintain that? How do I go from such an amazing feeling when my eyes are closed and I'm listening to music or whatever your spiritual practice is? How do I maintain that throughout my day so that it doesn't just happen when I'm in a room with my eyes closed, so that I can actually take that into my life? Because that's really where the rubber meets the road. That's when it matters. Not in your meditation, not how high you can go in your meditation or how great you can feel in your breath work, but how great you can feel during the day when life happens. Because guess what? We're 3D human beings operating in a physical world and living our lives. And all this spiritual practice is to enhance your life, is to help you enjoy your life, help you to experience joy and pleasure and happiness and laughter and community and all those amazing things with your eyes open. So I created this video to help you guys because I know it happens to the best of us, because we live in a 3D world and we have a life and shit happens in that life. And I want to help you be able to take all the amazing spiritual principles and practices and take them to a practical application so that it's making a difference in your everyday life. So I've broken down the 4 things that you can do to help you maintain that elevated emotion throughout the day, so that when life happens and when you have a confrontation with your boss, or when you have a confrontation with your husband, or when you get in a fight with your friend, or when your kids are driving you crazy, you have steps to follow so that you can get back into that elevated emotion. Because after all this spiritual practice is all about self-regulation, and that is where your own personal freedom lies. That's when you stop becoming a victim in your life and you start being the conscious creator, is when you can learn how to self-regulate. Self-regulation is one of the most important aspects of the work that I teach in my online program, working with women to help them take all these abstract spiritual things and actually apply them and integrate them into their everyday life so that they can learn to self-regulate when those negative emotions come up and become the creator instead of the victim, instead of blaming everyone or everything or our kids or our husbands or whomever else, the traffic, the weather, on why we feel like shit. And so when you can learn how to self-regulate by applying these 4 simple steps, then you stop being the victim in your life and you start being the creator on a day-to-day basis, on a moment-to-moment basis, not just in your meditation, not just in your ayahuasca, not just in retreats halfway across the world when you're unplugged from everything else, but when you're actually living in a normal, everyday life. Because that's, after all, when it really matters. So I'm gonna break down these 4 steps for you so we can set you up to succeed, so that you can master self-regulation, so that you can master being the conscious creator of your life, and that you can master your life, essentially, at the end of the day. So, step number 1, set yourself up to succeed. So what does this mean? Well, I'm going to share a short little story. This is like a little allegory that I heard somewhere, I can't remember, on some podcast or something, but it stuck with me because it talks about setting yourself up to succeed when you know what your patterns are, when you know what your behaviors are, when you know, like usually around 11, 12 o'clock, I get really irritated. And then usually when I come home, I get really irritated. So when you start to become the observer and the scientist of your life, you start to notice these patterns of when things usually happen during the day. So this little allegory story is about these ships way back hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years ago. And these ships would try to cross the sea to get to this other island that they had to get to. But every time they went past this particular part in the sea, there was this ocean god that would curse everybody on the boat and they would all die and no one could ever make it past it. So one of the captains set himself up to succeed before they crossed that path. Because what would happen when they go across this part of the particular sea, this sea god would sing to them, and then all the men would jump in the boat and they would all die. That's the curse that happened apparently on this part of the sea. So what this captain did with his crew is they tied themselves before they were about to cross that particular area where everybody died and it was cursed. They actually tied themselves to the ship and they put earplugs in their ears. So when they went past this particular passage, they couldn't hear anything and they couldn't move from the boats because they tied themselves to the boats. And they were the first ship to cross it and make it past the curse and get to the other islands. And of course, it's just an allegory, but I think it's a perfect story to explain setting yourself up to succeed. So what does this look like in your everyday life? What does that mean? How does that story help me? Well, you're gonna do exactly what I did, which is certain times throughout the day, you're gonna set an alarm and you're gonna go do something different. So what this looked like for me in my own journey is I would have my meditation in the morning. I didn't always feel good after. In fact, there were many times I felt super duper duper frustrated after 45 minutes of trying to meditate and trying to quiet my mind. I was working full time. I had 3 kids. I had another side job. So my life was very busy. So trying to calm down my mind proved to be very, very challenging. And so sometimes I didn't always feel so great after that meditation, but I did it anyways. And so I would get up and then I knew usually around lunchtime, my energy would start to drop. I worked for the state of Idaho in the unemployment office at the time and I was a case manager. And I knew usually around 11 or 12, my energy would really start to drop, and my energy dropped, so did my emotional state. I wasn't in that high vibe, like, oh, this is great, life is great phase. It was like, ugh, I'm back in life and this is a struggle, right? Because my life at that point wasn't everything that I wanted it to be. And so what I did at lunchtime was I would go sit in my car and turn on a meditation, even if it was just for 20 minutes. That 20 minutes, doing that every day, helped for the whole second half of the day, because then I could tap back into that feeling that I had when I meditated earlier, or breath work, or whatever your spiritual practice is. And so you can't say that you don't have time for this, because everybody has 20 minutes in the middle of the day. Everybody has 20 minutes in the middle of the day. And if you don't make time for it, even if you have to go into the bathroom and sit on the toilet and put earphones on and put some music on and get back into that state, you can use meditation where you're quieting your mind. You can use breath work. All you have to do is do a 4 to 8 breath, meaning breathe in for 4 seconds, breathe out for 8 seconds, do that for at least 5 minutes. It will calm your sympathetic nervous system. It will put you into a parasympathetic response, which is rest and digest, and you will feel nice and relaxed. And when you feel nice and relaxed, you can access these higher emotions, these elevated emotions. So setting yourself up to succeed means prepare your day so that at times throughout the day where you know your energy drops, you set aside time ahead of time to do the things that help you get into a higher vibration, a higher emotional state, whatever you want to call it. And so that could be, like me, that could be at 12 o'clock. At 12 o'clock, you set your alarm, and when that alarm goes off, you go sit on the toilet, you go sit in your car, you go sit in the closet. There's no excuses. You can find a place to go where you're there for 20 minutes and you tap back into that energy. You tap back into that high frequency. Maybe it's at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and maybe you go take a walk at 3 o'clock every day in the afternoon for 20 minutes because that helps you get back into that elevated state. Maybe it's right before you go home from work, because you know when you walk in that door, if you were anything like me in my previous life, you knew the moment you walked in that door, it'd beat a lot of chaos, pure busyness into the moment you laid your head down on the pillow at the end of every night. At least that's what my life looked like. And so maybe it's right before you walk into the house at the end of the night. You sit there for 15 minutes. You put music on. Maybe it's just music that makes you feel really good. Maybe it's something really funny that you watch. Whatever it is, have a list. Have a list of those things that you know when you do them. I call it a pit kit in my Authentic Life Blueprint online program. This is how we prepare. This is how the women prepare themselves and set themselves up to succeed. They have what they call a pit kit, and it's basically just a go-to list for when they are feeling the lower dense emotions, for when they're feeling like, oh my God, I'm doing all this internal work, I'm doing all this spiritual work, and yet I still can't maintain these elevated emotions. Let me let you in on a little secret. It's completely normal and there is nothing wrong with you. This happens to all of us, especially if you're engaged in life. It's one thing to sit up in the Himalayas and be a monk and not be engaged with life. Of course, it's a lot easier to stay in an elevated emotion. But if you're living an everyday life, of course these triggers are gonna happen. Of course these things are gonna come up. Of course these stressors are gonna come up. And so you're normal, it's okay. There's just steps that you can take to help with this. So make yourself a pit kit. List 5 things that you know if you do any one of those 5 things, it will put you in an elevated state. It will put you in an elevated emotion. And set your alarm for 2 different times throughout the day so that you're setting yourself up to succeed. Now, in order to actually follow through with this, this is going to bring me to my step 2. Accountability. This is such an important step because as we all know, listen, this is what I say all the time. We all know what it takes to lose weight. We all know what it takes to feel better. We all know the steps to do that. Everybody knows the steps to do that. It's just actually doing them that we all struggle with. And most of the time, it comes down to accountability. Most of the time, it's because it's a lot easier to stay accountable to somebody else than it is to stay accountable to ourselves. That's why I believe in coaching. That's why I am a coach. It's why I believe in community, because most of the time we'll let ourselves down first before we let somebody else down. And so accountability is huge in any change you're trying to make in your life. I am telling you, in my own life, I use accountability in my everyday life with my friends, with my loved ones, because I know that if I'm held accountable, I will do it. So what this means is, find an accountability partner that will make sure you are doing the things to set yourself up for success. So these two really work hand in hand. Find somebody that you know will hold you accountable and say, hey, this is my plan to set myself up to succeed. Twice a day at 12 o'clock and at 5 o'clock, I'm gonna spend 10 minutes doing these 2 things that make me feel really good, that keep me in that elevated state. And I need you to hold me accountable to do those things. Here's another little trick that actually I heard from Mama Gina's personal coach on an Instagram live, and I loved it, and I'm stealing it, and I use it in my own life. But what she said is, find an accountability partner for something that you want to do, for something you want to create, to hold yourself accountable, to set yourself up to succeed in this case. Then tell your accountability partner what the consequences will be if you don't do these things that you want to do. In other words, if your goal or your thing that you want to do is, hey, Mary, I want to set myself up to succeed this week. So Monday through Friday, I'm going to set my alarm for 12 o'clock and 5 o'clock. And at 12 o'clock and 5 o'clock, I'm going to take 15 minutes to do some breath work, just so I can calm my brain and my body down, get into that parasympathetic response, relax. And then when I'm in that relaxed state, of course, it's a lot easier to access elevated emotions. Then, Mary, if I don't know if that's the name I used, but if I don't do that, if I miss a day or I find an excuse or I didn't stick to it, my consequence will be fill in the blanks. So for me, because I love my coffee in the morning, I really, really do. I love my coffee in the morning. It's a whole ritual for me. Everybody's sleeping. It's quiet. I love the smell. I love the taste. I'd love to just sit there and be with my coffee. It's a very spiritual experience for me. But that's a ritual that I love in the morning. I love my coffee. And so for me, one of my consequences, one week, if I didn't work out 3 days that week, was that I missed a day of coffee. I couldn't have coffee for a day. That was my consequence if I did not hold myself accountable. And of course, I had Scott as my accountability partner, and he for certain was gonna make sure that I did this. And he held me to it. I worked out 3 days that week. But really the most important thing is that I was being held accountable and that I had an accountability partner. So I wasn't just trying to do it on my own, because let's face it, it's hard trying to change on our own, right? And so if you communicate with somebody, if you find an accountability partner and say, hey, This is what I want to do, and these are the consequences if I don't do it. I heard her share ideas like throwing a $20 bill out the window, giving her kids money, all sorts. You get really creative, but something that you really, really, really don't want to do. So what is the consequence if you don't hold yourself to setting yourself up to succeed? Pick accountability partner, and then tell your accountability partner. That also brings me to step number 3, which is community. So this takes the accountability one step further. In my own journey, I had an online community of people that I got to share all the things that I was going through, and they would help me through it. They would give me advice. They would tell me how great I'm doing. It was a community of support. And in that phase of my journey, I didn't have a lot of support in this area, in spiritual growth and meditation, and trying to become a better person, self-help, whatever word you want to give it, transformation, to give it a general term. But I had this community of people that was there that was not in my regular everyday world. So I had community to talk about the things that I was struggling with during the day. And that was where I would get my pick-me-up. So instead of like going and doing drugs or going and shopping or going and overeating, I had this community that would help give me that same feeling when I was decreasing in energy, when I was feeling like, oh, I don't know if I can do this, when I was feeling like, oh, it's my husband's fault, when I was feeling like my boss is a jerk, when I was in those spaces and I was losing that elevated emotion, I had a community to go to help remind me in those moments, it's worth it, I was doing great, keep going. All of those things we kind of need to hear when we get down here, when we start to wonder, is this working? Is this making a difference? The community is there to remind us that it is. Community was a huge aspect of my own transformation, and it is a huge aspect of my programs and what I use to help women on their own journeys. Our community is such a tight community of women, and it's so integral into their own change and growth and transformation. It's probably the thing I'm proud of the most, is my amazing community of women. So, third part, community. Find a community. If you don't have one, find one. You can find them online, you can find them in person, but there are tons out there. Find a community that you resonate with, that is uplifting, not ones that like keep telling you you're a victim, but ones that actually make you feel powerful and really good about yourself. Lastly, most importantly, in my opinion, in fact, one of the most spiritual things that you can do is this step. Laughter. Laughter, laughter, laughter. I cannot stress this enough. Laughter is so important to every single aspect of your life, but especially when we're talking about how do I maintain an elevated emotion throughout the day. Laughter is the quickest way to spark that elevated emotion, because how many of you know when you're like really pissed off and you're wanting to be a victim and you're wanting to blame everyone and you're raging or you're angry or whatever it is, smile, like literally just a smile. You cannot stay at this emotion if you're smiling. You cannot stay down here if you're laughing. Laughter, I think, is the most spiritual thing you can do, because sometimes on this spiritual journey and when you're having an awakening or when you're in the self-help field, it can get really freaking serious sometimes. And so laughter brings us back to feeling like a child, to just letting flow run through us, to not take things so goddamn seriously. Which reminds me, my source of laughter, my medicine to keep me into that space is called the Rule Number 6 Facebook group. If you're not in it, I highly recommend you look it up. Even if you don't use Facebook, look up Rule Number 6 on Facebook. Literally, Rule Number 6 is don't take yourself so goddamn seriously. That group makes me laugh so hard. It's my Sunday sermon. It's what I do Sunday mornings. I go in that group and I spend a half an hour laughing my ass off, because laughter is such an amazing medicine for the soul, to connect you with your soul, to connect you with source, to connect you with spirit, to connect you with people. How many of us know when we're in a group of people and we're laughing, how amazing it feels? You know, those laughters that you get that you can't turn it off. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Laughter is so important. Scott and I talk about this a lot in our community calls, because they can get really silly sometimes, and him and I can kind of go off the rails. But it's because all of this growth, transformation, personal work, inner work can get so heavy and so serious. And so it's so important to keep it light and remind yourself why you're here. And that's really to enjoy life, to feel joyful, to feel love, to feel happiness, and to feel laughter. And so that right there, find laughter throughout your day. When you're starting to feel like you're dropping, join rule number 6, or have a playlist, have a YouTube playlist of short videos that are really funny. Laughter, say something funny. Whatever it is, find a way to laugh when you feel yourself dropping down. It is the quickest cure to get back into an elevated emotion. So those are the 4 steps to help you maintain that elevated emotion throughout the day. Because as I said, it's one thing to feel great when it's easy to feel great. It's a whole nother thing to train your body how to self-regulate and how to get back into a state of an elevated emotion when it appears as if something in your life that is happening that's causing you to drop that emotional state, which, as I said, it's normal. It's part of the process. But the more that you can learn to self-regulate using these tools, the more power you will have in your life. And this is exactly one of the aspects that we dive deep into in my online program, the Authentic Life Blueprint, that will help you take all that spiritual information and actually apply it, as we just did, to your everyday life, where the change really matters, with your eyes open, awake, walking through life. That's exactly what we dive into. Not only do we cover steps like this, but we cover steps in all areas of your life. So if you want to know more information, if you're ready to take all that spiritual knowledge and actually go, okay, I'm ready to actually make a change in my life and make it matter, schedule a call, fill out an application, talk to me or my team, and we can go over all the details and see if it will help you in your journey. Until next time, I love you all.